Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Senior Living Today. I am so excited to introduce our guest to you today, Denise Swick, owner of Downsize Allies. Denise, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So this is your first time on our podcast. So would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and Downsize Allies?
Downsize Allies is basically our slogan is the house and everything else. So having been in real estate for multiple decades, years in the business, time on the planet, I just started realizing a need for people that were downsizing or settling in a state. And some of those needs are necessary. And most of it's organizing and managing the chaos that people are experiencing during that time of downsizing to a smaller house or a condominium or a community such as yours.
So I know when we talk about downsizing, one of the things I've heard you say is start early and start small. So let's talk about starting early first. How does someone determine when early would be for them? Is that the same timeline for everyone?
No, but it should be because literally what they say, and I think it takes longer than this, the experts, whoever they may be, say that it takes literally 1 week for every year that you've lived in the property. Well, oh, wow. I just recently myself downsized. And I haven't lived in my house. I've lived there 15 years, but it probably could have taken me it literally took me about 6 months to prepare. So basically, it's never too early to start because, quite frankly, we accumulate a lot of things that we don't use or don't need, thinking that we may use them or need them, and we really don't. So it's never too early to start the downsizing process.
So even if you aren't planning to move yet, it definitely is helpful to go through your things on a frequent basis and make sure you're getting rid of things you're not using.
Which I thought I was doing, and I wasn't. And we get into some situations where, people have just years and years and years of stuff that they've never going to use and they've never used. And, enjoy your stuff now, use it or get rid of it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the small aspect of that. What do you consider to be small? Would that be small items, small rooms, or starting small as far as only a couple days of the week? What are your recommendations?
It can be both, but really when I'm talking about starting small, it can be an overwhelming process to go into a room like, let's say a basement, for example, where you've stored the majority of the stuff you don't need. But I promise you in your pantry or in your linen closet, you also have multiple towels, duplicate, everything that you're not going to need or use. I just recently helped a client downsize and, actually the father moved to Pittsburgh and the stepson said, I'm never going to have to buy hand towels, dish towels, or bath towels ever again in my life because his mother unfortunately passed away. And he says, I have a lifetime supply, which is good for him, but it was cluttering up the house. So start with a linen closet, start with the pantry, just start the process. And once you start, you can move on to like your closet, the coat closet, just start downsizing those things before you go on to the really big areas of the unfinished basement or the garage or the attic.
I imagine starting small helps keep people from getting overwhelmed in the process and then just giving up and walking away.
It is. Well, it kind of gets you in the practice, like of going through like, have I used this? Do I need this? Do I enjoy this? And you don't use it. You don't need it. You don't enjoy it. Let it go. Let someone else need it or enjoy it.
So what are your recommendations when it comes to duplicates of items? So for example, I know I have a few things in my kitchen that I might have like 2 or 3 of. What do you recommend when it comes to duplicates?
How many cookie sheets do you really need? Right? So, and that's just it. Like the funniest thing is going back to a personal experience. When I just downsized, I had 7 measuring cups, 7 Pyrex measuring cups. And oh, by the way, I don't cook or bake. So why did I have seven? I don't know. I probably couldn't find one in the back of a cupboard, so I'd go buy another one. You know what I mean? So that is really the first place to start. Once you get through start the process of like a linen closet or a pantry, then you start going through your duplicates because you can only use 1 or 2, maybe 3 Pyrex measuring cups at a time. How many cookie sheets are you ever going to need? How many, baking trays? How many, crock pots? Like I hear people say, oh, I have 10 crock pots. Well, if you're feeding an army, maybe you need 10 crock pots, but I don't know, keep what you use and you enjoy and get rid of the rest of it. It will make everything much easier, whether you're downsizing right now in an instant or whether you're planning on doing it 5 years from now.
Yeah, and I think that's a great suggestion. So let's say I would be moving to a smaller space. So for example, from a house to an apartment, how would I choose what to take with me? Like, especially if there were less rooms in the space I was moving to. So if I was moving from a 3-bedroom to a 1 or 2-bedroom, how does someone decide what to take?
Yeah, we work with this all the time, and you start with your needs and then your wants, right? And a lot of times, if you are coming from a very large home and you're used to your king size bed, and now you're moving into a 1 or a 2-bedroom apartment or condo or community, those rooms aren't going to fit your king size bed generally, right? So you may have to realize what you're going to have to get rid of to fit your new space, and you may have to purchase new items, right? So basically start with what you absolutely need, that favorite chair that you'd love to sit in, your coffee table that you can't part with, all those kind of things. And then it's really important to space measure the area that you're moving to, so you know what will fit after you figure out, what you really want and what you really need. And then you move it to the new place. And sometimes it does actually mean that you're going to have to buy some new items.
So one thing I know about the downsizing process is that it can also be difficult for family and friends. So what are some suggestions that you have to make this easier?
What I talk about in my presentations I do on this subject is basically just being transparent, authentic, and coming from the heart. Like I have conversations about how to have conversations with your parents about downsizing, because sometimes it's that other way, and there's that whole dynamic of they're still the parents, you're the kid, even though you might be, 55 like me and whatever, you're still a kid. And there's also the other side, like some children are really, really attached to the home that they were raised in, the china that you use, whatever the case may be. So it's really important that you help the other side see where you're coming from, and being really authentic and transparent about why you want to make the downsize. Some people, finances are really tough to talk about, Alexandria. So, sometimes children don't realize the financial burden or the financial hardship that their parents or their grandparents are having, because that's just not something that people talk about, And so staying in that house could be really financially harming the person that's there, which also leads to, depression and, all those other kind of things that they're dealing with at the same time. So be transparent, be authentic, and let them be heard. Like ask them questions like, how do you feel about this? This is why I'm doing it. And this is, the major reasons. Then that's a good time to bring that whole group together and then help them, that whatever they're attached to in the house, it could be that, grandfather clock, let them take that grandfather clock with them to their house, let them utilize it, because 9 times out of 10, it's not going to fit in your new space anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So bring them into that downsizing process and make them feel a part of it.
Yeah.
One of the phrases that you say that I really like is allow yourself time to reminisce. So how would you suggest doing this?
Personally, I think sometimes people need to do it alone, right? So we talk about people tend to have a lot of pictures, a lot of memories, anything that you want to keep, you can digitize all of that stuff, right? So if people are tactile, if they want to go through, they feel it, they go through the pictures that they need, and just really think about like, what did this memory mean to me? And what does this picture mean by me continuing to hold on to it? Do I have that memory? How does it make me feel? And if there's certain pictures, like I had mounds and boxes of pictures, and I literally broke it all down to like a baggie full of pictures that were really important, that were really memorable to me, and things that I wanted to take with me that made me feel a certain way. You know what I mean? So just give time to talk about the memories, talk about the china, talk about the grandfather clock, talk about the pictures alone and or with your family members as well.
So one of the things we hear people talk about frequently when downsizing and decluttering is using the concept of making a keep pile, a giveaway pile, and a maybe pile. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that's a good process? Does it usually work for people?
No, because one key point you said there, the maybe pile, right? Mm-hmm. There can be no maybe pile, because if there becomes a maybe pile, you're going to not downsize. So there is a keep pile, like what are you taking with you? What are you going to donate? Like, what are you going to let somebody else use and enjoy that you may not know? What are you going to give away? Like, what are you going to, your niece or your children or your grandchildren, your neighbor or your friend, whatever, what are you going to let them enjoy? Then there's going to be the sell pile, because there are things that are saleable. And unfortunately, a lot of times things we think that are saleable are not, but there is some things we can sell. And then there's the trash pile. If you notice on those 5 things, there's no maybe pile, because the maybe pile will be the biggest pile. And that'll waste your time because you'll have to go back through the maybe pile to put it in one of the other 5 categories.
And then you'll probably end up keeping things that you actually don't need or use.
You don't need it.
So I know we've talked a lot about the process of downsizing and tips, but let's talk about feelings during that process, because I think downsizing can be an emotional process for many people. I know in your presentations, you've mentioned a few things, one of them being emotionally prepared. Can you touch on what that means?
Emotionally prepared means different things to different people. So emotions are typically what keeps people from making the decision to move. It's the fear of change. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of a new place. It's the fear of what other people will think. It's the fear of where, what's going to happen next. So once you have to get yourself really clear on the why of what you're doing and help the family members understand the why that you're making this decision, then it becomes a less emotional part of the process. If you apply also all the other things that we talk about, which is reminisce, take some time, start small, give yourself all of this space so that it's not such a difficult decision once it ultimately and finally happens.
Another thing that I know you've talked about is framing it as an opportunity. And I really like looking at downsizing in that way. So can you explain a little bit about what that means and how one might do that?
So again, it's depending upon whether it's the person that's downsizing or whether it's the family members. This is all a big deal for almost everyone on both sides and for different reasons. So when you look at framing it as an opportunity, for example, if it's a financial situation, or if it is just a house is too big. So we talk about financially, like think of what else you can focus on. Can you finally take that course that you wanted to take? Can you finally take that vacation that you wanted to go on? Can you spend some more time with friends or family? Can you, go golfing more? What can you do by not having to maintain your yard and spend the money on the maintenance and all those kinds of things? A recent example, and I just helped a gentleman whose wife passed away, moved from a 5,000 square foot house into a 55 and older community. And we were at dinner after the fact, and we were talking, and I've known the gentleman 25 years. I've never seen him so excited, because he said, "You know what, Denise?" He goes, "I hate the outdoors. I was spending over $1,000 a month maintaining my lawn for the neighborhood. Now I can spend that $1,000 a month on what I love, which is wine."
I love that.
So, like whatever that is for somebody, like that's an opportunity. Now he can drink more red wine instead of, cut the blades of grass, whatever.
Well, I think it's an interesting way to look at it, because I think so many times when we talk about downsizing, everybody focuses kind of on what they're losing or what they're giving away, and not so much on what they're gaining from going through that process. Yeah.
New relationships that you'll have, new places to explore. It may be closer to like things that you never thought of, like some of the communities and so forth have their own communities inside the communities. Like, are you going to be able to go see movies now because it's in your community where you don't have to drive over there. So there's just so many opportunities.
Absolutely. So I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I would like to circle back to it, maybe go a little bit more in detail, just because many of our listeners are older adults who are maybe considering downsizing and moving to a senior living community. And I know one of the toughest things is how to have the conversation with children about downsizing, about selling that family home that holds so many memories and is very sentimental. So how do you recommend they would go about approaching that conversation with their children?
Again, it goes back to the transparency and the authenticity. I think in the absence of knowledge is, weakness. So if they don't know maybe that there's a financial situation, or that, maybe mom has fallen down the stairs twice and didn't want to tell the kids, you know what I mean? Like when you're really open and honest with your children, why you're doing what you're doing, it's going to help put you on a level playing field, you know? And if maybe they have some options that they'll come over every week and mow the grass and put a stair lift in, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But those are rare situations. Most of the time, like 95% of the time, it's better that they just move into a community such as yours. There's the other benefits of safety. You know, like if you just put all the positives and all the negatives and present that to your family, you know, like be authentic, be transparent, and look at all these things that we're gaining as opposed to these few negative reasons why we're not going to be here.
Absolutely. And I think that's such great advice. We talked about a lot today, so I just want to open it up to you. Are there any other tips that you have when it comes to downsizing or any other information that you'd like to touch on?
Just understand that it is a process, right? Unfortunately, that process can sometimes be quickly expedited, like it could be a health issue or a death or whatever the case may be. And when you do that, you make really emotional decisions and not always the best decisions. So just starting sooner rather than later and understanding that having grace with yourself and with the people around you, yet knowing it's an ultimate thing that's going to happen, and just to give yourself some grace and some peace and a plan, right? That's the other part of it.
Absolutely. Well, Denise, it was such a pleasure having you with us today. You shared some incredibly helpful tips for downsizing, and I'm sure they will help some of our listeners. I know they're going to help me as well. I'm definitely going to keep up on downsizing and going through my things more often now. For everyone listening, be sure to tune into our next podcast in 2 weeks, because Denise will be back with us again. And this time she'll be talking about getting your home ready to sell. Be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast so you never miss a new episode. And Denise, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.